Stairs and very manageable.
Hey Sam, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
One additional housekeeping matter. I'm just wondering, would you be able to run my PowerPoint since I'm realizing that if I share my screen, it's probably only going to show up in the Zoom portal.
Just plan on it, but you gotta tell me when to turn the page, you know the drill.
Yep, happy to do that. Thank you.
Suzanne, there was another letter that came in after I. Okay, so that's it. Make sure you got it. And I know Gia was planning on being here. I'm just wondering if she might be running a couple minutes late.
I was thinking of 6:30 and he was like, oh, wait a minute. I'm going.
Right.
Well, hopefully nobody else is making a mistake. I just kind of.
I hope not.
Do we have a code volume here in the room when we do these things?
I can go get
I mean, I don't know that we refer to it, but it would make sense to just have it.
I did have the codes, but I'll go grab them. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is my master, those from me to get.
Just as, you know, formally.
Oh, absolutely.
Hi, I see we're waiting on some additional members. I'll introduce myself in the meantime. I'm Nick Cotton Baez, the town attorney, and look forward to working with all of you as the town has more Board of Adjustment hearings and meetings. So you all know, Board of Adjustment matters typically require 4 or 5 votes of the membership. And those are on matters, quasi judicial matters, which are variance decisions and also appeals of administrative interpretations of the zoning code. But other votes of the Board of Adjustment can be made by a simple majority, which is 3 out of 5 members. So if the board would like, we can get that part of the meeting started and wait on the 4th member in order to conduct the public hearing that's going to be before you tonight. Or if we want to wait a few more minutes, that's okay too. When you're appointing officers, of course, you want to have as much of your membership as possible in attendance. So I will leave that up to the board. What do you guys think?
I just talked to her, she's on her way, she got held up for.
Ian coming too?
Ian is out of town, he was gonna try and join via Zoom, but I haven't seen him yet, but she is on her way now, so you'll have for you.
I will wait till Gina shows.
Too bad Ian's not here. Is there a way to contact him by phone and ask him if he's, because he can participate on the phone as well, if he doesn't have internet access.
Well, and I sent him the Zoom link and it had the dial stuff, so.
Could be working still.
Yeah, I know he's on some kind of a trip, so I'm assuming since he didn't make it in, then he's probably not gonna be able to, because he was gonna.
It's Gia.
All right, thank you guys.
All right, well, welcome everyone. I know it's kind of awkward to have me talking from the screen. So please do bear with me. I believe I heard your name's Gina, the newcomer.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I'm late.
Yeah, no problem. It's nice to meet you. I'm Nick, I'm the town attorney, and because you haven't had a meeting yet, I'm going to stand in as sort of the chair for the beginning of the meeting. It's kind of unconventional, but we're making do with what we have. And so you have an agenda before you, and the first item is roll call, and I would ask Sam to please do the roll call.
You know, sir. Nick Cassett,
President.
Suzanne Watson,
Here.
Kim Finelli, here. Susanna Talbot. Here.
Great, and for the record, the meeting started at 5:37. And so the next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, and we just need a motion and a second and then a vote. So do we have a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion to accept the agenda.
A second.
All right, and so we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any against? No, thank you. So now we're going to get into appointment of officers. The town code requires that you appoint a chair, and a secretary. But it's my recommendation that you also appoint a vice chair, as is allowed under the code, but not required. And the vice chair would serve as chair of the meeting, meaning leading the meeting and doing somewhat what I'm doing right now, in the chair's absence. So typically, this would be done by an appointment would be made by motion. So if somebody would like to appoint someone, we'll start with the chair. Then that can be done right now.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Suzanne Watson for chair.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Can I vote on my own thing?
You can, yes.
Aye.
Okay, so we have Suzanne appointed as chair. And Suzanne, if you're okay with the typical procedure, I would now hand this over to you. And it's my recommendation that the board appoint a vice chair next and then a secretary. Briefly explain that the secretary typically just signs documents, attests documents that the chair signs, so as to verify the chair's signature. That's really the only responsibility of the secretary, just so you all know.
Can I ask, does the secretary record anything for the meeting, like the decision, or is it all, are we relying on the clerk?
That would be the clerk.
Okay, so does someone want to make a motion to appoint a vice chair? Go ahead, Susan. Make a motion. Got to get used to doing it. So to appoint a vice chair is what we're on now.
She's a chair now, so
So be the vice chair. Who do you want to be the vice? We could do Ian. Steve.
That's funny.
I'll second that. I think Steve would make a good vice chair. You want that position?
Okay,
It's okay with me.
all those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and now the secretary. Would someone like to make a motion to appoint the secretary?
I'm not sure what the secretary does.
What Nick just said is basically you verify the chair or in lieu of the chair, the vice chair's signature on any decisions that get made, correct?
So if you make a decision or you,
We make a decision and we.
all of us.
It's a formality. You just make sure the signature is where it needs to be.
And then it's her.
And it's, yeah.
And then on what's going on.
I point G.
I second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We got it. It is down. So now we're on to the next item on the agenda. Now, I know in the code, it says that we adopt rules of procedure during the first meeting of the year, but we didn't really notice that. And I don't know, are we ready for that? And we have a script that's been provided by the attorney to follow for this specific meeting. Is this what we would consider rules of procedure at this point in time, Nick?
Yes, those would be the rules of the hearing procedure. I suppose that the board could adopt some additional procedures for meetings. Yeah.
If we can do that in the next meeting, it would be good.
Well, plus, in addition, we have a meeting tomorrow to be educated in that regard. correct?
Yes.
We could always post another meeting, another time for you guys to meet, for you guys.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to begin with the script. This is a public hearing. Are we ready? Okay, this is a public hearing on the application submitted by Margaret and Todd Doherty, appealing the administrator's decision to deny approval of a variance to the setback requirements of the, or deny recommendation of the requirements of the setback requirements for the town code to allow for the construction of a wraparound porch on their property located at 817 3rd Street, Paonia, Colorado, 81428. The Board of Adjustment will follow these procedures in conducting the public hearing for this item. This item must be evaluated under criteria established under the Paonia Municipal Code. To properly evaluate the application, the Board of Adjustment will hear from the town attorney tonight, the applicant, and the public before it decides whether the applicant should be granted, denied, or a decision deferred until a later date. Everyone wishing to speak will be given the opportunity. The order of the hearing shall be as follows. Town attorney, introduction of applicant and a brief summary of the application, the applicant presentation, and public comment, applicant rebuttal or response, and then the final call for questions from the board, and then the close of the public hearing. During the public comment portion of the hearing, members of the public attending in person and desiring to speak should approach the lectern. Those participating online should use the raise the hand function and wait until the town clerk unmutes their lines to speak. I don't see any instructions for phone participants. Sam, do you know if anybody's trying to participate by phone right now?
Not as far as I know.
Okay, there's a slightly different set of instructions for that. I think it's, you follow the instructions on the phone. I think it's number 7 that you punch if you want to speak. Members of the public may speak for up to 5 minutes each. Please direct your comments to the board, not the applicant. You will be asked to state your full name and address for the record and swear to tell the truth. Prior to referring the agenda item to the board for discussion and action, I will close the public hearing. After the public hearing is closed, no further comment from the applicant or public will be taken. However, the board may ask for advice from the town attorney. Public hearings are recorded for the public record. Does anyone object to the hearing process as described? I don't hear any objections. Do we have proper notification of the hearing?
Yes, and in your packets, you have the proof, the mailed out notifications, the newspaper publication, and their sign on their property.
Okay, and is the applicant present? Okay, thank you. Are there any board member disclosures of potential conflicts of interest? And if so, you can state them now. Okay, I hear none. Okay, the time is, glasses are strong, 5:48 p.m. on Wednesday, the 22nd of March, 2023. And I will now open the public hearing. Will the town attorney please introduce the applicant and give a brief summary of application?
Yes, thank you. And Sam, this would be when I would have to ask you to show my presentation, please. So I'll introduce the applicant, even though I cannot see them. Do we have both Margaret and Todd Doherty in the crowd there?
Yes.
There you
Okay,
have.
great. So I'm sure the board can see you better than I can. And I'm just going to give a brief presentation brief presentation, basically introducing your application and the procedures of what's happened so far. And I am seeing it on the Zoom screen as well, so I appreciate that, Sam. So this is an appeal of an administrative denial of an application for variance submitted by Margaret and Todd Doherty. Next slide, please.
Can I interrupt briefly? I'm
Sure.
sorry, Nick. We need to get onto the Wi-Fi here. Samira, do you have a password?
And it's showing on. some weird names.
Are you on?
Yes, on the hashtag.
You got a hashtag too?
No hashtag.
No hashtag.
Let me see if I can. You'd like to. Okay. So I have a printed packet here, Nick. If you were to, are you online, looking at something as you start your presentation?
Yes, I'm seeing, yeah.
So what page would you say you're on for Gia here when I give her my computer?
He's on this.
He's on this.
This is the
Oh,
PowerPoint
okay.
presentation.
Okay, so he's up there. I'm not on.
Or there.
I just wanted to get on to.
Which I can't read, but that's okay. Sorry. My glasses aren't strong enough.
We're just, you guys will have to excuse us. This is our
Okay.
first time.
So
It's all good.
he's not, you can't see anything on the.
That's okay. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Why don't you get this downloaded on your? Yeah,
That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
So you can just chat.
Yeah, because I have still this. I'll just look at Suzanne's. We'll get okay.
And yeah. Okay,
Ready for me to proceed?
yes. Nick.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is just so the applicants had applied for variance to the setback requirements of the zoning code to allow I'm sorry about that typo, the construction of a wraparound porch on their property located at 817 3rd Street. The former town administrator denied their application administratively or recommended denial. There's some discrepancy in the code about whether there's a recommendation or there's an actual denial. But that's not important to the purposes of the hearing tonight because you're reviewing this application with fresh eyes. You just see what the town administrator has said, but you don't have to follow her recommendation necessarily. So the applicants are now appealing the town administrator's decision to the zoning board of adjustment pursuant to section 161510C of the Paonia Municipal Code. And I believe that section is included in your packet this evening. Next slide, please. So this is a copy and paste of the administrator's decision, and you do have that in your packet this evening. So the board has full authority to determine the credibility of that decision. I won't read it out loud now, but you will be evaluating that decision vis-a-vis the code requirements. Was that decision correctly made? Was it incorrectly made? And does the application before you tonight for variance meet the code requirements? So next slide, please. So touched on this a bit already, but this is your role tonight is to determine whether to grant or deny the Doherty's application by application of applicable town code criteria. You don't need to give deference to the former town administrator's decision. Next slide, please. So these are the required setbacks in the code, and some of which the applicant is asking to vary pursuant to the variance provisions in the Paonia Municipal Code. So required on Third Street, there's a 20-foot setback. Required on Delta Avenue, there is also a 20-foot setback. But there is a front yard setback variation set forth in the code. And it says an area is established and predominantly built out prior to the effective date of the initial ordinance codified in the code. The front yard setback shall be equal to the average setbacks for the other buildings on the same block, or a maximum of that required by the new regulation as provided herein. So I believe the applicant will have some evidence that speaks to the front yard variation that I saw was included in the packet. So that criterion might become relevant to your decision tonight. And then there's a side yard setback requirement of 6 feet. Next slide, please. So right now, the property does have some existing non-conforming setbacks. On Third Street, instead of 20 feet, they are built out with a 15-foot setback. On Delta Avenue, they actually have a little larger than what's required of 21 feet. They're required to have a 20-foot setback, but as of now, without constructing what they're seeking to do as part of this application, they're actually set back further than they need to be. And then the side yard, they have a 3-foot setback, and I put an asterisk there because the town administrator determined an existing side yard setback of 6 feet. However, the improvement location certificate shows a concrete sidewalk and stairs set back 3 feet from the property line. So there's an interpretation there that can be made by the Board of Adjustment tonight. But really, you're looking at the application for what they're seeking to do and not what's existing now. So with that said, next slide, please, Sam. So what they're requesting, and of course, the applicant will have an ability to speak to this as well. So, if there is any correction in what I'm saying, the board can certainly hear that evidence. I'm just presenting the application as I've seen it. And what they're requesting on Third Street is 15 feet, and that's no change to the existing setback that they have with their property is currently built out. On Delta Avenue, they're requesting a 15-foot setback, which is a 6-foot reduction to the existing setback of 21 feet. And in the side yard, they're requesting a 3-foot setback. I had stated that the former town administrator had said that they were seeking to reduce their setback of 6 feet to 3 feet. But I think it's open to interpretation whether they already have a existing setback of only 3 feet because of the concrete sidewalk and stairs. So they're requesting improvements here that might be subject to the non-conforming structure provisions of the town code. And those are set forth in section 161330A of the Paonia Municipal Code. So I'm going to give you those code sections as well as part of this presentation. Next slide, please. So this is what a drawing that the applicant had submitted as part of their materials tonight. And it shows what they're seeking to do. On the right side, you can see the existing concrete walk and stairs coming up from the carport area. And then you can see that what they're planning to do is build a wraparound porch. And then you can see the setbacks that they're requesting on Delta Avenue and Third Street as well. Next slide, please. So getting into the specifics of Delta Avenue, there is a required setback of 20 feet or equal to the average setbacks for the other buildings on the same block, or a maximum of that required by the new regulation as provided in the Payunion Municipal Code. So really what you're looking at is, are they requesting something can they have a setback that's equal to the other buildings on their same block? So that's something you can consider in granting the variance. Next slide, please. So this is a photo from the applicant's presentation materials, and it shows what I believe is their direct neighbor and their porch extending into the setback. And this will become relevant if you're going to look at the criterion that says that it can be equal to the average of the other buildings on the same block. So I just wanted to include that as relevant material that you'll be hearing from the applicant about tonight. Next slide, please. So side yard criteria. So there's an existing 3-foot setback. It's non-conforming. 6 feet is required. The applicant is requesting to replace the existing concrete walkway and stairs with deck improvements without any further encroachment into the setback. So that's what they're requesting here. It doesn't, if you look at the existing setback as being 3 feet, then they're not asking to encroach further with these deck improvements. Next slide, please. So as promised, this is the non-conforming structure criteria that's set forth in the code. And you are able to review this in your interpretation of the application tonight. So this basically says that if there is determined to be a non-conforming building or structure, it cannot be altered or extended in a way that would increase the degree of non-conformance. So what the code says is, if there is something that would increase the degree of non-conformance, exceptions may be allowed if the purpose of the alteration or extension is for repairs to a building or structure that's ordered by a public official to make it safe. The purpose of the alteration is to make maintenance repairs that are needed to keep the building in good condition. And there's a special hardship created by strict application of this code, and a variance is granted by the Board of Adjustment. So you will hear some testimony and receive some evidence from the applicant on those points as well tonight, I presume. Next slide, please. So these are your variance criteria, and this is the board is bound to make their decision tonight on this criteria. So really what you're looking at is, if there's, by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property, or exceptional topographical conditions, or extraordinary and exceptional situation or condition of a piece of property, and the strict application of a regulation, and we're talking about setbacks tonight, would result in peculiar or exceptional practical difficulties to, or create an exceptional undue hardship upon the owner of the property, the Board of Adjustment has the power to grant a variance, provided that the variance has to be the minimum variance necessary to alleviate the practical difficulties of undue hardship. The variance is granted without substantial detriment to the public good, or substantially impairing the intent and purpose of the zoning code. And the circumstances found to create a hardship were not created by the applicant. So those are your basic criteria, and I would encourage you to continue to look at those throughout the hearing when you're receiving evidence and when you're coming to your ultimate decision tonight. Next slide, please. All right, and I have already introduced the applicant tonight. So before the applicant is introduced to make their presentation tonight, I'm not sure if this is in the script, but if the board does have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
I actually have a question. As the chair, it's not like I'm the mayor. I can vote, I can make motions, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I have a question.
Sure.
So everything that you ran down for us so far, do we have to do that whole long procedure for each case, or can we pre-study it? Because I've looked at what you just went through like 3 times already before you went through it again. And can we make our assessment and all vote and then explain why if people have questions, or do we have to go through that whole routine each time?
It's in the, yeah, you consider what is presented to us in this room. In this room, we're judge and jury. We don't consider things that we've heard outside of the room, is the way I'm hearing it. Nick, you can correct me.
I'm just saying, do we have to go through 15 minutes of that introduction of what needs to be voted on? Or can we say what we're voting on? And then if anyone in the audience or if the applicants have questions, then we can go through what you just described the last 15 minutes, and we can say why we voted the way we did.
Yeah, I think as we get more familiar with the processes and you know, particularly after the training tomorrow night, and this is a little bit outside the hearing context, but I think that the hearing time will significantly cut down. I'm not going to be making a presentation in each of your public hearings. At least that would be ideal. You would just hear from the applicant, and then you would hear from the members of the public. So that's right. And then you would, of course, make your decision solely based, as Chair Watson said, based on the information you receive in the hearing itself and not any outside of the hearing materials or testimony.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one practical question that has to do with setback. As a contractor, setback generally means the wall of the house. The overhangs are not considered part of that necessarily. Is that correct?
That is correct for purposes of the town code. Structures are, you know, it's kind of an ambiguous term that's open to interpretation. So one interpretation, for example, that I gave tonight had to do with the interpretation of whether the stairs, the existing stairs and walkway count, right? So the walkway, like a driveway, perhaps that doesn't count, but do the stairs count as being something that encroaches in the setback? I think the deck is certainly something the town is considering, and you can liken the deck to the stairs in this instance. It is a structural improvement in essence, the way that structure is typically taken to mean in the code. So, you know, if you're considering whether a deck can encroach in the setback, do you have to consider the existing stairs as already encroaching in the setback? That is a question for you tonight. That might be important to consider when you're considering whether to grant the variance tonight.
Okay. So we'll move on. Will the applicant please state your name and address for the record?
Here. My name is Margaret Doherty. My address is 817 3rd Street, Paonia, Colorado, 81428.
Thank you. Do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Okay. Please proceed with your presentation.
Okay. Okay, thank you for having us. And thank you to Sam for all of your assistance in helping us post our sign correctly and meet the public notice requirements. Next slide. So this is our improvement location certificate. When we purchased the house, the driveway that you see sort of shaded in that takes you from the carport to Third Street is not there anymore. So that would be the only difference. And you can see here what we are proposing for setbacks, which Nick described accurately. So there's nothing else from here. I just think, yeah, that's right. All the setbacks are shown accurately on this description. Next slide. So we have an existing front porch and an existing back porch. They are both, I'm not sure when they were constructed, but they're both unfortunately in bad repair. The concrete is pulling away from our house. And the railings are all moving, you know, and are no longer safe. And actually the porch roofs of both the front porch and the back porch are leaking and full of hornets nests, and you know, they're in bad repair and bad disrepair. So they need to be replaced. So I think that's what I have to say. Yeah, the ceiling is worked and it's collapsing. That's all I have for this slide. Next slide. So here's a picture of the back porch. This actually shows a gas meter also going to be. This shows how the back porch that Nick described is starting to sort of pull away from the house. It also does not have a railing and it's over 30 inches high. I think by code we would be required to have a railing. It feels pretty unsafe when you walk out there. You're pretty high off the ground. One thing that Nick did not describe is that it has an existing roof overhang that you can see in this photo. The roof comes out about 26 inches, doesn't come out the full 3 feet for whatever reason. But it's about, you can see that it's an existing about 3 feet from the adjacent property. And it's also only accessible from what used to be the carport, which we are now using as a back patio. We have an existing garage with a curb cut on Third Street and a driveway into our existing garage. So we don't need 2 curb cuts on Third Street, which is actually, I think, more desirable for the fewer curb cuts into Third Street. So we removed one of those, we repaired the curb, it was all approved by the Public Works Department. So we only have 1 curb and driveway coming into the property, going into our existing garage. So we could park there, or we can park on the street. We normally park on Delta Avenue because it's just safer. There is kind of a busy street and it's a little difficult to get out with groceries and that kind of thing. So we park our car on Delta Avenue. And we created a gate into the property, which you can see in this photo. That's my car, actually. You can see the gate, and that way you can walk in to the back, into the back door, which is also the kitchen, which is like where you take groceries and that kind of thing. So that's our main entrance, like our family entrance. Our formal entrance is still on Third Street with the porch, but this is the entrance we use a lot. We come in from that gate and then walk through and then have to come around and go up those stairs into the kitchen. Okay, next slide. So we had a wraparound porch designed by Carolyn Cripley. She's I think she described herself as a designer. She just helped us with figuring out like how, if we were to get approval and a building permit for a wraparound porch, how it would work in terms of connecting to the roof. We don't have a building permit yet, and obviously, until we were approved, then we would apply for a building permit and make sure our designs meet the building permit. But the idea is that we would replace the existing front porch and back porch in their existing locations, and then wrap them around such that you could enter the house, from Delta Avenue. One of the advantages of our property, is that the slope goes, from our north southeast corner, like where, Lamborn is, down to the North Fork of the Gunnison, right? So all the property slopes that way. And when you're at the corner closest to Delta Avenue, the porch is really only at that point would be about 8 inches off the ground, which is really great from an accessible standpoint. I think it would be very simple to add a pretty simple ramp, and then our porch actually becomes accessible from Delta Avenue sidewalk through the gate onto our porch, and then you could access the front door or the back door via wheelchair or with a stroller, or just being able to access more safely with the railing. So that's an important feature for us that I think this porch would allow. And what we're hoping to do is to replace it with new sustainable materials. There's more in that about our neighbor's letter. David Schneider, who lives next door, south of us on Delta Avenue. He and I both work in areas related to natural hazard mitigation and climate change. And so we're both very interested in using sustainable materials that are also resistant to wildfire. So he and I are in agreement on that we should be building with materials that hopefully resist some wildfire impacts if possible. Okay, next slide. So here's just an idea it gives you a better idea of what the porch would look like. And so you can see here that there is an existing covering over our back porch. And so I don't want you to have a feeling that we're building a deck necessarily. We're really building a covered, or we're requesting to build a covered porch. I don't know if that's a distinction in your ordinance, and Nick will have to help you with that. But what we're proposing is a covered porch, and you can see the new roof line that go all the way around, and then posts. And then Carolyn didn't show this in her plans, but we talked about obviously anywhere over 30 inches off the ground would have to have a railing to meet the town's building code for any kind of railings. Next slide. So also Nick referred to this. There is, I think this is as of right. If you can meet the front porch setback and meet the average of everyone on your block, then you don't have to request a variance in that circumstance. So we tried our best to measure other people's setbacks using like Google Earth. We thought about going out with a measuring stick, but
You don't even have to go to that. Y'all agree on
didn't
that.
have people to do that. We sort of walked and we sort of thought about it, and we were like, I don't want to trespass on anyone's property. I don't want to knock on anyone's door and put them out. We're going to just use Google Earth and do our best. So these are the measurements based on Google Earth. The average still came out higher than what we're requesting. We're asking for 15 and the average is 16. But I think that I'd still ask for 15 because I think a 6-foot porch is just much more comfortable than a 5-foot porch. You get a little bit, it becomes like a walkway if it's only 5 feet. It's hard to put like a couple chairs and a little bistro table even. And so we are still requesting 6 feet if you would be willing to grant that for us. But we wanted to give you, and I'm sorry that picture didn't come out very well in the slide of the adjacent houses, but so there is some variation. Unfortunately, that one house that's 36 feet back really hurts. I'm not sure it's quite right. And also the addresses are very difficult. Unfortunately, the Google addresses do not match the actual addresses. So anyway, we did our best. Next slide. So here's what we're asking, to maintain the existing setback from Third Street and from our south property line. But we're asking if you grant us a 15-foot setback from Bills Avenue. And we did have, tonight, our neighbors, Susie and Mike, submitted a letter of recommendation or support, which we appreciate. We did not know about that. But we did reach out to our adjacent neighbor to the south, Dave Snyder, and we wanted to make sure he was okay with it before we came forward before you. And he did submit a very nice letter to you all. And he asked that we take reasonable efforts to identify and use fire resistant and fireproof design and materials, and that we employ professional design and or construction services. And we are very happy to do that if you find that you would want to add that to the approval. Did I miss? Do you have any questions for me?
Yes, does the board have any questions about it?
No, I understood it quite well with your packet, which was very appreciated. All of that work you did was right up, and it really helped me understand all of it. So
I do have a question, because I went by and looked at the property. It's kind of an odd, not odd, it's a regular shape, but because of you got both streets that you're, facing. It makes it different, right? The big question I had was, what was the determining factor to abandon the carport and close off the fence so that you don't have access the way that it was originally designed? That's how it was designed.
Yeah.
Pull into the carport, you walk up the back underneath the covered, there's that extension of the roof to relatively keep you protected from the weather. So I'm just curious.
Well, and at some point, somebody built a garage. So somebody made the decision that there would be, access. They got another curb cut from the town at some point, or maybe, I don't know how they did it, but they got that second driveway off Third Street. And then also there's an alley. So there's really a lot of vehicle access to the property. And the carport is just a really cool space. So it's a big cement area where we hope to put out a lot of couches and chairs and just really enjoy our backyard versus putting a car there or a couple of cars there. It's right next to our bedroom windows. So it's not very, doesn't feel conducive to me to have a bunch of cars coming in and out right there with like open windows next to our bedrooms.
and appeal, Steve, you gotta have that.
So, and it's not very comfortable also to back onto Third Street. It's a pretty busy street for the town. So you would be doing a lot of like pulling in, moving your car around, pulling back out. So, I don't know, it never felt like a great place to. So we're turning it into what we hope to be sort of a nice patio, a big outdoor space where we can enjoy, news weather. And
Yeah, it's really nice. I think the way you designed it, I drove by it too. I agree.
The other question I had has to do with, is some level of hardship a component of your application?
Well, I think the only hardship that exists today is the only way to access our home is to walk upstairs. And so what we're proposing is a more accessible porch that is closer to the ground, that would be more easily accessible into the property. So we're not asking to go beyond the current setbacks that exist for these two porches, but rather than build a ramp up to those doors, we're wrap around a corner that allows us to get up much more easily.
Do you think this is enough of an overhang to keep snow and ice off your pathway, or is that
Well,
I don't know
so,
if you,
so we're proposing, I mean, I don't think it's gonna be perfect, right? I mean, we've learned a lot, we've lived here, through the winter now, so. And we have learned a lot about, metal roofs and the kind of, gutters that you need. Our current house has no gutters, but we know there's specific metal roofs. So we're gonna be working on a gutter system. And also, I mean, we just don't wanna go closer to Dave's house than what we currently are. So we're just gonna have to live with the 3 feet overhang and do our best to keep that entrance into the kitchen safe, with materials, whatever we can to make it less slippery.
so I'm glad you brought up the topic of gutters because, I wasn't sure if your drawing indicated the gutters. I think it's a really important component, especially as you get closer and closer to property lines. So you avoid conflicts with neighbors, dumping water onto the property line. So, I'm glad you mentioned gutters as something you're adding.
I think they thought of that though, because of the south pitch of the property going towards Third Street. It's gonna flow down towards Third anyway off the people's property. Okay. So does anybody have any more questions for the applicant? Okay, now how about the town attorney? Question for the town attorney? Okay, I actually have a question. I don't see any evidence presented by the other staff, the police, public works, so there's no evidence that anybody else has presented about concerns to the placement of their proposed addition as it relates to town property.
Other than the administrator's decision
Yeah,
that they're asking for a variance from.
well, she didn't decide. She just recommended that she wouldn't recommend an approval.
Right.
But when I look at, this is another discussion, but when I look at her reasons for the reason she wouldn't recommend it, she just cites the zoning code, but that's why they have to ask for a variance. It's not a reason for denial. It's what they're asking. They're asking for a variance from the code. And so, yeah, so Corinne's was really the only one, but we don't have any more current information is what I'm asking.
Yeah, that's correct. And what I was trying to do for the I guess the sanctity of the hearing process was to present the former town administrator's recommendation as being the staff report. I serve as the board's advisor, so I didn't want to be presenting too much testimony other than my interpretation of the code. So yes, tonight what you have to go on from the staff is the former administrator's recommendation.
Okay.
Nick, do you see any issues that might arise? I know it's a variance, so it's an individual, it's an individual choice about this specific property. But it does open up the opportunity for other people in town to say, you gave it to them.
I don't see that at all.
Well, I'm just saying, there are a lot of people. And I'm not saying, wait, I want to be really clear about this. I just want to bring it up just to talk about it. And I'm not necessarily trying to, put a fly in the ointment, but I want to at least be aware.
Sure. Yeah. And from a legal perspective, the granting or denial of a variance, whichever way you go, does not set a legal precedent. So you would evaluate each property case by case. What's potentially relevant here is if you vary the Delta Ave setback and to allow it to go to 15 feet rather than the average of 16 feet, you're contributing to an average setback potentially that's slightly allowing for more of the properties to maybe maybe it gets closer to 15 feet instead of 16 feet. That's really the only precedent that your decision would make tonight. And I think that's what's relevant to this particular application. But yeah, granting of variances, it's very clear in the law that that doesn't set a legal precedent. So if you had any other reason to deny another variance in the future, based on the specific facts presented to you at that hearing, you're not bound by this decision at all.
Okay.
So any more questions from the board? We're fine?
Were there any negative comments from anybody in the community?
We haven't received any.
I included every comment that I received.
Okay.
You'd have to state your name and
Yeah,
address.
Hello, board, for the record, Todd Gordy, 817 Third Street. And just anecdotally, also when people would come by and look at the public notice sign, ask us what we're doing, I would say at least a half dozen positive support from our neighbors. And I know they aren't written or otherwise public testimony, but at least I can convey that I've had only positive. So I haven't heard anything negative.
I'm assuming that you are telling the truth.
Yeah, we did have it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to the public comment portion of the hearing. Yeah, do we have the applicant sit down and open up the lectern, Nick, when we open up public comment?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, why don't you, thank you for your presentation, Margaret. Okay, are there any members of the public who would like to speak? Okay, hearing none. I think we acknowledge that we've had several letters in the packet that are available for review. The board has reviewed those. Okay. Moving on. Okay, hearing no calls from the public for an opportunity to comment. I now close the public comment portion of the public hearing. Does anyone else from the public wish to speak regarding the application? Hearing none, I now close the public comment portion of the public hearing. Okay, does the applicant have any rebuttal evidence or testimony? No, because we didn't hear public comment unless you want to rebuttal letter or something, okay? Does any member of the board have further questions for the applicant or the town attorney? Seeing none. Okay, we're gonna go into let's see, okay, before I close the public hearing, I want to state that the documents included within the record for this public hearing include all materials included in the Board of Adjustments packets, any PowerPoint or other presentations given tonight, all the written referral and public comments received regarding the application, and the town's zoning ordinances and other applicable regulations. I will now close the public hearing. At this time, I will call for board member discussion and comments. This is our chance to discuss the item. Okay.
I do have one question. Is David Snyder your immediate neighbor?
To the south.
Right, to the south. That's great.
Have any?
No, I have a pretty good idea what I would like to say and of the issue, so.
Okay. Okay, I'll make a comment. I find, I mean, when I look at the code and I look at our setbacks, I think these corner properties, you know, if we only have 2 lots, they're really encroached on by these setbacks. I see this house that was built prior to the code. You know, when they built that house, they didn't know there was going to be a zoning code that would impinge the ability to create safe or covered access to one of the entrances they designed, which happens to now crowd the side yard lot line. So it seems, I don't know if I'm correct in seeing that as a hardship. You know, it's in essence an exceptionally narrow lot for the types of houses we build today. And for people wanting to protect their property against the elements, perhaps. I'm looking at the design of your porch and it's open. I don't see solid walls creating a really restricted access of, you know, fire personnel had to race through. It's open. It's kind of flow through design. So I don't see it as being quite as, what are you, encroaching into the setback as, you know, as serious of an issue, although it does definitely encroach. But I don't know, I'm not as uncomfortable with it as I would be if it were a foundation of the solid wall and completely blocking off and enclosing the structure. I do want to note that your addition is going to bring you more in compliance with chart number 16-2 of the zoning code, which requires 30% coverage of a lot. You have to cover 30% of your lot in this town with structures. And you're way under in that currently. So you're going to be coming up to compliance with that part of our code. And I'm being a little facetious because that's a big old mistake that needs to be corrected before someone really takes advantage of that one. So anyway, so moving on.
I
Sorry.
just want to thank you for your patience through the whole process. Because it's ridiculous, in my opinion, that we can do that. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. You were very patient because I think the code requires a decision within 30 days of your application and
And the last time we were supposed to meet, it was someone like
yeah,
crazy.
and I'm hoping that, you know, we can get a clearer process described in our code because I think there's some conflicts there. So hopefully things will be easier to proceed in the future for everybody.
Just to, you know, I went and looked at the property, you know, I see what you're up against. Your neighbor's structures are right up against the fence line. Right up against the fence line. So it's kind of, you know, strange to imagine that it wouldn't be okay to, you know, take what pathway is there on that south side. You're extending it, and you're not going up to the fence line, you can stay within the footprint basically of what's there. It is kind of odd lot because you really only have one side lot. You know, I mean, the way the house sits, technically, the sides would be the alley and delta, and the back would be up against your neighbor's house where the access to the kitchen is. So it is sort of an odd one in that regard. I also checked all the properties along on your side of things. The only thing I would say that's slightly different is your immediate neighbor. His is in essence a big stoop. He doesn't have any overhang on it. That's a technicality because his house is set back, right? And the overhangs that he has are standard 2-foot overhangs, but you know, in general, I would say that it's not unreasonable to consider, you know, granting this at this point. You know, that's my gut feeling.
Okay.
You know.
To your previous comment, the house was built 1947, right? So, and the existing door from the kitchen is existing door. So I'm quite sure that at that time, people had different requirements or different ideas how to live. They didn't use outside so much. So I see clearly why you want to have an outdoor patio and you want to have a safe access to your house, and putting a ramp, which would allow you that, is great idea because we all getting older, and those steps without railing, as they are right now, do not look safe. So I drove around as well. And I was impressed with what you already did to the house. And it's tastefully done, and the porch will only add to the feel of the neighborhood, to the, plus all your neighbors are happy. They don't want the weeded lot and dilapidated house. They all are so happy with you that I don't see, I mean, the problem, like what was in the code? Detriment to the public good. I don't think there is any detriment to the public good in your case.
Okay, does that complete the? Yes.
I can go on, but I think.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to approve or deny the application for the variance? Make a motion to approve. Patient.
I second.
Okay. All those in favor?
I,
Aye. Aye. Okay. That's 4 ayes, and that 4 affirmative votes means their application is approved. Does anyone object to the hearing procedures? Oh, wait, I jumped back to page 2. I'm sorry. That was it. Okay, so the motion is approved. Did we need to be a little bit more specific in that? Giving a reason, like, you know, as a matter of equity, or do we have to, you know, in the motion that was presented, is it enough to just say we approve the motion?
Yeah, I think was the motion to approve the application. I think that's sufficient. And yeah, and I'll just say that the board gave very sufficient and good reasons in their deliberations prior to making the motion. So I think that is sufficient. And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to say to the applicants tonight, I'm sure they know to work with Dan Reardon on the next steps, but if which is, you know, the building permit process, and if you're not already, and so if you need contact information for Dan, I'm sure that Sam would be happy to provide that.
I have his number.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd like to accept a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Okay. The meeting is adjourned. Thanks. I guess I don't have to accept a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, you can
I'm
say
scared.
the chair.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, some boards do a motion to adjourn, which doesn't require a second and then a vote, but some just adjourn the meeting. So, yeah. Well, nice to meet everyone tonight, and I look forward to seeing you at tomorrow's training.
Are you going to be here in person?
Unfortunately not, sir. I will be standing up and trying to be more animated though.